Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India News Hour, India's voice to the world. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran. Coming up in the next hour, India rises to become the third most powerful country in Asia, surpasses Japan in the 2024 Asia Power Index published by Lowy Institute of Australia. The second phase of voting underway in India's Jammu and Kashmir. Election Commission says people coming out to vote in large numbers is a history in making. Israel and Hezbollah defy calls for de-escalation. Hezbollah launches a rocket targeting a Mossad base near Tel Aviv. UN Security Council to meet on Lebanon. And tensions soar in the Indo-Pacific as China launches an intercontinental ballistic missile. The rare trial run carried a dummy warhead. India becomes the third largest power in the Asia Power Index. As per the 2024 edition, India surpasses Japan, reflecting its increasing geopolitical stature. Under Prime Minister Narendra Modi's leadership, India has gained global recognition. The country's dynamic growth, youthful population, and an expanding economy have all contributed to the nation's rise. India's participation in dialogues, economic outreaches, and its role in multilateral diplomacy and security cooperation have added to its steady rise. India's substantial resource base and strong GDP growth continue to drive economic growth, making India a key player in the Indo-Pacific. Driven by strong GDP growth and positive investor sentiment, India is poised to remain among the world's fastest growing economies until 2030. Goldman Sachs has said that the country's earnings have started to stabilize over the past few years, with mid-term profit growth momentum that might sustain until 2030. It said that India's profit pool is likely to shift towards investment cyclicals, which includes autos, real estate and chemicals, along with industrials, which could see the largest rise in profit share. Also, according to the global brokerage, Nifty's total earnings growth and market cap have both achieved an 18% compound annual growth rate over the past 5 years. Moody's Analytics and S&P Global have backed the claim, saying that India's economy is projected to grow faster and to remain above 6.8% for the 2024-25 fiscal. Now, India's Make in India initiative completes 10 years on Wednesday. It has transformed the country into a global powerhouse, manufacturing everything from space to semiconductors and electronics to electric vehicles. India's Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal said that mobile imports stood at 48,609 crore rupees in 2014-15. By 2023-24, it had dropped to 7,665 crore rupees. The minister says that under the leadership of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, manufacturing jobs grew by 200% between 2022 and 2024. He said 99% of mobile phones used in India today are made in India. He said that it proves that Make in India has become a national force, paving the way for India to emerge as a global manufacturing hub.
The last decade has been one where the macroeconomic fundamentals have been made strong. The country, through a whole lot of measures, Startup India, one district, one product, our 20 new industrial smart cities, reduction of compliance burden, Jan Vishwas bill to decriminalize laws, improvement in our ease of doing business ranking, promoting technology, innovation. It has been a holistic, whole of the government, whole of the nation approach in partnership with private sector, both in India and internationally, that we have been successful in making the brand India recognized all over the world.
And Prime Minister Modi has complimented all those who have worked to make the Make in India movement a success. He said on X, and I quote, "Make in India illustrates the collective resolve of 140 crore Indians to make our nation a powerhouse of manufacturing and innovation. It's noteworthy how exports have risen in various sectors, capacities have been built, and thus the economy has been strengthened. The Government of India is committed to encouraging Make in India through all possible ways. India's strides and reforms will also continue. Together, we will build an Atmanirbhar and Viksit Bharat," unquote. On the 10th anniversary of the Indian government's flagship initiative called Make in India, ITC Corporate Affairs President Anil Rajput said it illustrates the collective resolve of 140 crore Indians to make the nation a powerhouse of manufacturing and innovation.
Government in the last few years has given huge push to the manufacturing sector. PLI schemes have been transformative. You must have read recently that even semiconductors are being planned to be manufactured in this country. I have no doubt that going forward, India would become certainly a center for manufacturing, not only for India, but even for the neighboring nations.
Right, moving on, India's Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir recorded a voter turnout of 36.93% till 1 p.m. local time in the second phase of its assembly election on Wednesday. Voting began at 7 a.m. in 26 assembly constituencies spread across 6 districts, including Srinagar. 2.5 million voters are eligible to vote. This phase will determine the fate of 239 candidates. A multi-tier security blanket has been thrown around polling stations to ensure that polling can take place in a free and fair manner. Polling booths are guarded by CCTV cameras. There are more than 150 special polling stations, including pink polling stations, stations manned by specially abled persons and youths, border polling stations, green polling stations, and unique polling stations. A selfie point has been set up to encourage voting. More than 15,500 Kashmiri migrant voters are expected to vote in Jammu, Udhampur, and Delhi. Polling will end at 6 in the evening. The Jammu and Kashmir Assembly election is being conducted in 3 phases. The third and last phase will take place on 1st October. The first phase on 18 September witnessed an impressive turnout of 61%. Counting of votes will be held on the 8th of October. An assembly election is being held for the first time in Jammu and Kashmir after the abrogation of Article 370. And India's Chief Election Commissioner Rajiv Kumar said in New Delhi on Wednesday that polling was taking place with much enthusiasm.
We are very, very happy that the voting is taking place in entire valley and in Jammu with extreme fervor and enthusiasm. Everywhere there are people around, long queues since morning, and even in areas where there used to be calls for boycott, there is an enthusiasm. People are giving a statement, a running statement, a standing ovation to the democracy, to the Jamhuriyat by standing so peacefully in the queues, waiting for their turn. And this is what is the history in making in J&K.
Foreign diplomats are visiting Jammu and Kashmir to witness the holding of election there at the invitation of the Ministry of External Affairs. A 15-member delegation comprising diplomats from the US, Mexico, Guyana, South Korea, Somalia, Panama, Singapore, Nigeria, Spain, South Africa, Norway, Tanzania, Rwanda, Algeria and the Philippines is visiting the Union Territory.
Now, it's a pleasure. It's my first time that I'm visiting Kashmir, Jammu Kashmir. So it's really a privilege to be invited by the Ministry of External Affairs to come and visit firsthand today's polling stations being open.
The organization is smooth, and we are told it has started 7 to the end at 6. And so far, the percentage here is 10% who have already cast their vote, and they are expecting everyone to come, and the whole exercise will end at 6 when everyone has been already at the polling station to exercise their civil rights.
And Tahir Nadeem Khan joins us from Jammu for more. Tahir, what's the latest you can share on the polling taking place in Jammu and Kashmir?
Well, Ramesh, polling is going on smoothly in all the 3,502 polling stations, which has been established by the Election Commission of India across 6 constituencies for 25,78,000 voters. Those are eligible voters. And right now you can see long queues, and as far as the polling at the figures at 1 p.m. are going, District Riyasi has taken the lead with 51.55%, closely followed by Poonch, nearly 50% of polling, and then Rajouri, which is 48% polling. However, the Srinagar is at the lowest ebb with just 17% of polling. But we must remember this thing, Ramesh, that 25,000 voters in only Habakadal constituency of Srinagar district, they are migrant voters, and they are given the facility to exercise their franchise to vote at Delhi, Jammu and Udhampur simultaneously. So those votes have not been added to the percentage. That means the percentage in Srinagar district will go higher than which has come right now at nearly 17%. But the thing is, we have observed that in the rural areas like Riyasi, Poonch and Rajouri, which have lesser basic amenities as compared to the urban areas, the people are more, voters rather, are more sensitive towards democracy and democratic process. If we see there is one particular, I should quote this station, which is Noorkot, which is in Poonch Haveli constituency, which had remained the hotbed of hostile border with every now and then shelling on there, the cross-firing there. But that Noorkot polling station, that has taken the lead with 55.78% of polling. That clearly shows that the people living along LOC are how enthusiastic, and they are more sensitive towards democracy and democratic process, because they want peace, they want development, they want better road connectivity. That is why they are coming in large number dressed in traditional attires, especially in tribal areas where Gujar and Bakarwals are there along LOC. They are coming in their colorful traditional attire. It really looks like a festival of democracy, and this trend is very encouraging, and it clearly indicates the way polling percentage is going on. It will surely shatter the record of first poll, which stood at 61.38%. The way it is going at around 1 p.m. Ramesh.
All right, we'll leave it there. Tahir, thank you, but we'll keep coming back to you for more as we go along. It's still to come on DD India News Hour. US President Joe Biden addresses the UN General Assembly for the last time. Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau faces a no-confidence motion in Parliament. It will be the first major test of his government. And Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky addresses a UN Security Council meeting.
This week on Defense Dynamics, as India prepares to celebrate the 8th anniversary of its deadly surgical strikes on the night of 28-29 September 2016, The surgical strikes were carried out in retaliation to Pakistan's terror attack on Uri garrison that killed over 19 Indian soldiers. One of the most daring operations carried out by India's special forces with long-term strategic implications. To understand all that and much more, do tune in to Defense Dynamics on Wednesday at 8:30 p.m. only on DD India.
You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran. To West Asia now, Israel's military on Wednesday said that it had intercepted a missile fired from Lebanon towards central Israel. Israeli forces struck a Hezbollah launcher used to fire the missile. The launcher was hit in southern Lebanon's Nafakieh area. Meanwhile, Hezbollah has taken responsibility for the missile attack, claiming to have targeted Israeli spy agency Mossad's headquarters near Tel Aviv, which it claims is responsible for the assassinations of its commanders and last week's explosions of pagers and walkie-talkies used by its members. After nearly a year of conflict against the Hamas in Gaza, Israel shifts its focus to its northern border with Lebanon, from where Hezbollah fires rockets. Israel's Defense Minister Yoav Gallant claims that military operations against Hezbollah will continue. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Netanyahu has delayed his trip to the US for UN General Assembly due to the security situation in the country.
An Israeli airstrike on Beirut killed a senior Hezbollah commander on Tuesday as cross-border rocket attacks by both sides increased fears of a full-fledged war in the West Asia. Israel's Air Force conducted extensive strikes on Hezbollah targets across southern Lebanon, including weapon storage facilities and dozens of launchers that were aimed at Israeli territory. A senior figure in terrorist group Hezbollah, who headed its missile and rocket force, was also killed. Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant claimed the attacks had weakened Hezbollah and would continue. Fearing escalation, Britain urged its nationals to leave Lebanon and said it was moving 700 troops to Cyprus to help its citizens in evacuation. Etihad Airways, Gulf Airlines and Fly Dubai also joined a number of international carriers in suspending flights to Beirut. Germany's Lufthansa had already suspended Beirut flights. US President Joe Biden also made a plea for calm in his last UNGA speech as a president.
We're also working to bring greater measure of peace and stability to the Middle East. The world must not flinch from the horrors of October 7th. Any country would have the right and responsibility to ensure that such an attack can never happen again.
Though Lebanon's Foreign Minister Abdullah Bo Habib criticized Biden's address as not strong and not promising by saying that the US was the only country that can make a difference in the Middle East with regard to Lebanon. The US and fellow mediators Qatar and Egypt have so far been unsuccessful in their efforts to negotiate a ceasefire in nearly year-old conflict in Gaza between Israel and Hamas. Meanwhile, UN Security Council is meeting on Wednesday to discuss the ongoing conflict in Lebanon. The new offensive has stoked fears that nearly a year of conflict between Israel and the terrorist Palestinian group Hamas in Gaza is escalating and could destabilize the entire region. Bureau Report, DD India.
All right, moving on. US President Joe Biden made a significant appearance at the UN General Assembly on Tuesday, delivering what may be one of his final speeches on the global stage. His address touched on critical themes central to his foreign policy, including support for Ukraine, international competition, and the importance of upholding the UN Charter.
US President Joe Biden gave a somber farewell address to the United Nations on Tuesday, using his own decision to drop out of the US presidential election to warn off the dangers of autocrats around the globe refusing to quit. The 81-year-old exhorted world leaders to stand up for democracy in the face of spiraling turmoil and conflict, urging support for Ukraine and pushing for peace in the Middle East. With 4 months left in office, Biden said it was a nation's people that matter the most and some things are more important than staying in power.
We must never forget who we're here to represent. we the people. These are the first words of our Constitution, the very idea of America. They inspired the opening words of the UN Charter. I made the preservation of democracy the central cause of my presidency. This summer, I faced a decision whether to seek a second term as president. It was a difficult decision. Being president has been the honor of my life. There's so much more I want to get done. As much as I love the job, I love my country more. I decided after 50 years of public service, it's time for a new generation of leadership to take my nation forward. My fellow leaders, let us never forget, some things are more important than staying in power. It's your people.
In his fourth and final address to the United Nations General Assembly, President Biden reflected on the conflicts he witnessed during his career in public service and warned that the world once again faced an inflection point.
I know many look at the world today and see difficulties and react with despair, but I do not. I won't. As leaders, we don't have the luxury. I recognize the challenges from Ukraine to Gaza to Sudan and beyond. War, hunger, terrorism, brutality, record displacement of people, a climate crisis, democracy at risk, strains within our societies, the promise of artificial intelligence and its significant risk. The list goes on. But maybe because all I've seen and all we have done together over the decades, I have hope. I know there is a way forward.
Biden's speech also covered the climate crisis, the urgent need for aid to strife-torn areas, and the need to address the challenge of artificial intelligence.
United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres denounced a growing number of governments and other groups who feel that they are entitled to a get-out-of-jail-free card. Take a listen.
Excellencies, the level of impunity in the world is politically indefensible and morally intolerable. Today, a growing number of governments and others feel entitled to get-out-of-jail-free card. They can trample international law. They can violate the United Nations Charter. They can turn a blind eye to international human rights conventions or the decisions of international courts. They can thumb their nose at international humanitarian law. They can invade another country, lay waste to whole societies, or utterly disregard the welfare of their own people. And nothing will happen.
Poland's President Andrzej Duda urged Russia to end the conflict with Ukraine. He told the UN General Assembly on Tuesday that the conflict destabilizes the region and poses a direct threat to global order and security.
Today we are facing, yet again, an extremely serious threat to global security. For the past 2.5 years, we have seen Russia's brutal aggression against neighboring Ukraine. This is a flagrant violation of fundamental norms of international law, such as the prohibition of the use of force in international relations. This unprovoked aggression is destabilizing the region and posing a direct threat to the global order and security. We cannot allow this war to turn into another frozen conflict.
For her part, Italy's Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni urged the United Nations to fight illegal human trafficking and criminal organizations in her address to the UN General Assembly on Tuesday.
I problemi del cosiddetto Sud
Our objective before tens of thousands of people who face desperate journeys to enter Europe illegally is to first guarantee their rights, to not have to emigrate and to not have to cut their ties with their homeland simply because they have no other choice. It's a desperation on which the reckless criminal organizations that are more and more powerful and ratified profit. I proposed a year ago from this podium to declare a global war against human traffickers, and I'm happy to see that the appeal did not fall on deaf ears.
In some more news from the Americas, Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau faces a no-confidence motion in Parliament introduced by opposition Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre. Trudeau's main rival in Canada's Parliament on Tuesday introduced a motion of no confidence in the ruling Liberals in a first major test of his unpopular minority government. Following a debate in the lower chamber of Parliament, a vote on the long-shot Conservative motion is scheduled on Wednesday. The motion follows the New Democratic Party's exit from a coalition with the Liberals. The confidence vote will be his first real test since the smaller New Democratic Party this month tore up a 2022 deal to keep the Liberals in office until an election that must be held by the end of October next year. Trudeau will have to survive a series of other confidence votes to make it that far. To global weather updates now, Tropical Storm Helene formed in the Caribbean as it moved across the Gulf of Mexico, approaching western Cuba with rain and possible flooding. Red flags are raised on the beaches of the popular Mexican tourist resort of Cancun as Tropical Storm threatens over the Caribbean.
The U.S. state of Florida is preparing for the arrival of Storm Helene due to make landfall later in the week as a powerful Category 3 hurricane. Helene is expected to unleash mudslides and flooding in Cuba before reaching major hurricane strength as it hits Florida with life-threatening ocean surge. Forecasters predict Helene will strengthen quickly over the warm waters of the Gulf of Mexico to become a major hurricane, packing winds as high as 115 mph. Governor Ron DeSantis declared a state of emergency in most Florida counties. People in some regions already faced mandatory evacuation orders on Tuesday ahead of expected coastal flooding. Alongside warnings across Florida, hurricane warning is in place for communities along the eastern part of Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula and a hurricane watch for Cuba's Pinar del Rio province. If the forecasts are confirmed, Helene would be the highest category hurricane to hit the United States in more than a year. Researchers say climate change likely plays a role in the rapid intensification of storms because sheets of rain began lashing western Cuba on Tuesday morning, prompting authorities to shut down schools, close ports and recall fishing boats. The storm's path also passes over the northeastern tip of Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula. Climate scientists say annual hurricanes in the Caribbean and Gulf of Mexico region have grown more frequent and severe due to global warming, and there is more energy in a warmer ocean for them to feed on.
Russia and Ukraine continue to strike one another. Military operations in the past 24 hours have increased with fierce clashes reported on both sides. Russian forces on Wednesday took control of Ukrainsk in Ukraine's eastern Donetsk region. Russia on Tuesday claimed that it thwarted 5 Ukrainian attempts to breach Kursk region, destroying Ukrainian military equipment, including armored vehicles and artillery. 3 people died and at least 36 were injured in the residential areas of Kharkov in Ukraine. Meanwhile, Ukraine's Air Force on Wednesday claimed that it shot down 28 of 32 drones and 4 out of 8 missiles during an overnight Russian strike. Ukraine also announced a significant victory, reclaiming an industrial facility in Kharkov's Vovchansk, eliminating Russian forces stationed there. The UN Security Council held a meeting on the Ukraine-Russia conflict. Addressing the council members, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky said peace in Ukraine cannot be achieved by negotiations alone. Zelensky said that the conflict will not end because someone grows wary or through any deal with Russia's President Vladimir Putin. Instead, he urged the West to back his victory plan, a strategy he claims could break Moscow's resolve even having a psychological impact on Putin.
Putin has broken so many international norms and rules that he won't stop on his own. Russia can only be forced into peace. And that is exactly what's needed. This war can't be calmed by talks. Action is needed.
On the sidelines of the UN General Assembly in New York, Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said the UN has turned a blind eye to excesses committed by Ukraine's forces in their incursion into Russia's Kursk region. Lavrov said that Ukraine uses weapons supplied by the West. He said that none of the UN representatives responsible for human rights raised concern over incursion by Ukraine. Right, now take a look at what else is making news around the world. Japanese citizens showed mixed opinions about their choice of candidate for a succession vote to elect a new prime minister. The election will be held on Friday. The Liberal Democratic Party has nominated 9 candidates. Shinjiro Koizumi, Sane Takaichi and Shigeru Ishiba are in the lead so far. Thailand launched the first phase of its flagship $14 billion stimulus handout scheme on Wednesday. It's believed that the scheme will benefit 45 million citizens who will each get $305. A massive wildfire broke out in the capital city of Ecuador on Tuesday. Firefighters and residents were seen working together to bring the blaze under control. So far, no casualty has been reported. The cause of the blaze is not known. Still to come on DD India News Hour. Sri Lanka will hold a snap parliamentary election on 14th November. India's External Affairs Minister says peace on the country's border with China is necessary for normalization of their relations. And India's Finance Minister to attend an Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank meeting in Uzbekistan.
Global warming and climate change are political and ethical issues. They're issues of rights, of equality, and of justice. Let's take a look at some of these questions that surround the idea of climate justice.
We have to move to green energy, which is solar and wind and all others. And therefore, we cannot have such a large area for conservation of the GIB.
Art doesn't sort of hit you on the head and sort of make you feel defensive. It proposes, and then the viewer can take away an idea, thought, and hopefully act on it to make a bit of a difference.
They had a show called Shubh Kal, and it was one of their oldest radio programs. So I used that show as my platform and started to work on creating content around climate change for this particular show.
You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran. A quick recap of the headlines. India rises to become the third most powerful country in Asia, surpasses Japan in the 2024 Asia Power Index published by Lowy Institute of Australia. Second phase of voting underway in India's Jammu and Kashmir. Election Commission says people coming out to vote in large numbers is a history in making. And Israel and Hezbollah defy calls for de-escalation. Hezbollah launches a rocket targeting a Mossad base near Tel Aviv. UN Security Council to meet on Lebanon. China publicly acknowledged for the first time that it successfully launched an intercontinental ballistic missile into the Pacific Ocean on Wednesday in a move likely to raise international concerns about the country's nuclear buildup. Chinese Defense Ministry said the intercontinental ballistic missile carrying a dummy warhead was launched by the People's Liberation Army Rocket Force on Wednesday and that it fell into expected sea areas. A statement says that the launch was a routine arrangement in China's annual training plan and not directed at any country or target. Despite reaffirming its no first use nuclear policy, the test signals China's push to modernize its nuclear forces in response to US missile defenses and rising regional tensions. While China insists the test was not directed at any specific country, the move is likely to heighten global concerns over its growing nuclear arsenal. Sri Lanka will witness a snap parliamentary election on 14th November. President Anura Kumara Dissanayake dissolved the parliament on Tuesday. Nominations will be received from 4th to 11th of October. Dissanayake was elected as the president of Sri Lanka in a close three-cornered fight. His alliance, the National People's PA, has only 3 members in the current legislature, 2 of whom are part of his cabinet, including Prime Minister Professor Helene Amarasuriya. People in Sri Lanka have mixed reactions to President Disanayake's decision to dissolve parliament.
Dissolving parliament was a good thing. It is better to have an election and a new administration.
If they govern without racism, caste issues and religious divisions, that by itself will be a great achievement.
And joining me from Colombo is my colleague Ahmed Muin Faruqi. Now, first up, why has the president called a snap election?
Good afternoon, Ramesh, and a very good afternoon to all our viewers across the world. Primarily speaking, you see, next August, that is August of 2025, was the time when the tenure of the current parliament would have come to an end. Right now, if we talk about the strength of the outgoing parliament, there are only 3 members of NPP in the entire parliament, and that's, a very difficult kind of a situation for the NPP government to go ahead and manage the affairs of the government on a day-to-day basis, because it's really difficult if you have only 3 members in the entire cabinet. Right now, if I have to add with regard to the capacity of the cabinet, also yesterday there was a swearing-in ceremony in which Dr. Helene Amarasuriya was sworn in as the Prime Minister, and Vijita Herath was sworn in as another cabinet minister. Now that said, it's a very, very small cabinet of 3 members that includes the president himself as well. President has kept core areas of defense, finance, energy, and likewise portfolios with it. While social sector areas have been given to the Prime Minister, which also include the public administration, health, education, women, child, youth empowerment, and the other areas which are more important in terms of internationally placing it, like the foreign affairs, environment, as well as if we talk about housing and various other infrastructure related things. That's where Vijita Herath has been given. Now, if we look at how the entire campaign phase had run, it was primarily on the bank of on the plank of economic reforms and how there would be a radical change, a mass change in terms of how the government has been functioning in Sri Lanka. Now, that said, it would be really difficult for the president to go ahead with a government in which they do not even have numbers, and that was the reason why such a decision was taken at a crucial juncture to dissolve the parliament and go ahead with polls.
Right. Now, that said, Ahmed, how does the president intend to stabilize the economy going forward?
Ramesh, it's frankly speaking, it's a very difficult task. It has taken about 10 years for Greece to come out of the economic crisis that it had. Now, Sri Lanka, when it had witnessed the economic downturn in 2022, it was probably impossible kind of a task for it to come back from that situation. India had helped in a huge manner by providing a $4.5 billion humanitarian assistance through various credit lines, as well as other assistances by providing essentials like food grains, fertilizer, medicine, and various other essentials. Thereafter, with an IMF deal, they have gone ahead and some amount of stability has come in, but the election campaign was fully entirely based on the electoral reforms and the economic reforms, and this is where the government is planning to have a radical change by bringing in more transparency, eliminating corruption, and bringing in systems change in every ministry and every department. That is where the government led by President Dissanayaka will be headed towards by talking about bringing about more accountability, probably also taking care of certain issues which had been plaguing the previous government, their corrupt policies, supposedly corrupt policies, and likewise. From me.
All right, we'll leave it there. Ahmed Moeen Faruqi in Colombo. Thank you. Much appreciated. Right, moving on, India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar has said that unless there is peace and tranquility on the border, there is no scope of normalization of relations with China. He was interacting with a select gathering in New York City at Asia Society Policy Institute. During the interaction, while he elaborated with India's overall relations with the world, he specifically mentioned that a bloody clash at the border amidst COVID-19 pandemic itself has overshadowed the relationship, and after a series of negotiations, only 75% of disengagement has taken place.
Until we are able to restore peace and tranquility on the border and ensure that the agreements which we have signed up to are adhered, it's obviously difficult to carry on with the rest of the relationship. So what has been the focus for the last 4 years is to, in the first instance, at least disengage the troops, which means that they go back to the camp, to the military bases from which they traditionally operate, because right now both sides have troops who are deployed forward. And when I said 75% of it has been sorted out, I was asked in a way to quantify it, to give a sense. It's only of the disengagement.
During his visit to Australia, India's Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal addressed a joint press conference in Adelaide with his Australian counterpart Don Farrell. Both nations reiterated their commitment to partner with each other to provide a bouquet of opportunities for businesses to leverage the full potential of the economic relationship. India's Commerce and Industry Minister is on a visit to Australia from 23rd to 25th of September at the invitation of his Australian counterpart. India's Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman will attend the 9th annual meeting of the Board of Governors of the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank in Tashkent, Uzbekistan. The minister met the Uzbek Minister of Investments, Industry and Trade. India is the second largest shareholder in the AIIB. The multilateral discussions will be centered around a broad spectrum of global issues relevant to the development agenda. Minister Sitharaman will sign a bilateral investment treaty with Uzbekistan as well. The treaty aims to promote extensive economic cooperation for the mutual benefit of both countries on a long-term basis. Electioneering gains momentum in the northern Indian state of Haryana. Leaders of political parties are holding rallies and public meetings to garner support in their favour. Addressing a rally in the city of Sonipat, Prime Minister Narendra Modi, while highlighting the failures of the Congress party, drew attention to the MUDA scam, which allegedly involved the Karnataka Chief Minister Siddaramaiah. Voting for the 90-member Legislative Assembly in Haryana will be held in a single phase on the 5th of October. Votes will be counted on the 8th. India's Minister of Minority Affairs, Kiren Rijiju, on Wednesday briefed media on 100 days achievements of his ministry in New Delhi. Highlighting the ministry's achievements, the minister said that the government took several steps to provide platforms and credit to artisans and educational support to minorities.
जो क्रेडिट प्लान है नेशनल माइनॉरिटी डेवलपमेंट फाइनेंस कॉरपोरेशन के माध्यम से जितना हमने क्रेडिट दिए हैं 1000 करोड़ और 2.5 लाख बेनिफिशरीज को अभी जो हमने 24-25 साल के लिए जो हमने तैयार किया उसको रिलीज किया गया है ऑलरेडी.
India's Vice President Jagdeep Dhankar inaugurated the second edition of UP International Trade Show in Greater Noida on Wednesday. The Vice President was joined by UP Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath on the occasion. More than 370 businesses from 70 countries will showcase their products at the event. It promises enhanced business opportunities and global outreach, showcasing Uttar Pradesh's rich craftsmanship, culinary delights and cultural heritage. The event is being held at the India Expo Mart and Centre. It will conclude on the 29th of September. India's Railway Minister Ashwini Vaishnav on Tuesday reviewed the trial of the Kavach 4.0 system between Savai Madhopur and Indergarh railway stations in the West Central Railway Zone. During the trial, the minister was travelling in the engine compartment of a Kavach-fitted train. Running at a speed of 130 kilometers per hour, the train stopped 50 meters before the red signal without any manual interference with the braking function by the loco pilot. Kavach is an automatic train protection system. It was tested for 7 different emergency scenarios, successfully functioning in each case. All right, time for some business updates. Commerzbank is Germany's second largest bank. It's one of those deemed too big to fail in the financial crisis a few years back. The German government saved it, investing up to 16 billion euros. Now that the bank is doing well again, investors from abroad have started to take note. Lars Holter is with Deutsche Welle. He joins me from Berlin. Lars, what's happening at Commerzbank?
Thanks for having me. Well, it's a bit of a financial thriller, complete with In the Shadow of the Night action. What happened is the German government, not believing in a state-owned bank, has been selling off some of its shares in Commerzbank. The shares the government had bought in 2008 and 2009 when it steadily increased its stake in the bank to make sure it got through the financial crisis. Berlin ended up eventually owning 25% plus 1 share. And now, like I said, they're selling. Last week, they offered a 4.5% stake in an overnight auction that was led by JP Morgan. And to everyone's surprise, that stake got picked up by Italy's UniCredit. And just after that bank had announced that they already owned 4.5%. No bank would just buy up shares of another bank if it weren't for an ulterior motive, of course. So Berlin and Commerzbank too, by the way, were suddenly worried about an unfriendly takeover.
Lars, what role is the German government playing in all of this?
The financial crisis started in the US. That was over the bankruptcy of Lehman Brothers back then. Banks around the globe quickly got in trouble. The German government did what it had to do and saved the bank, becoming a silent shareholder. But it's interesting to see what happened more recently. It's one thing, of course, for any shareholder, and especially the government, to unload some shares and move out of businesses that should technically not be owned by the government in the first place. But it's an entirely different thing when the process betrays incompetence, and that's what it looks like here. Apparently, Berlin was unaware of UniCredit's interest in Commerzbank. They also didn't know that they already had a stake and were a strategic investor in the bank. So they sold these shares to the Italians rather unwittingly and much too cheap. One could argue that an investor like UniCredit might have paid a lot more for shares it would like to buy as part of a bigger strategy. So the German government didn't do a great job here, and it's maybe just underlining why they shouldn't have their hands in this kind of business in the first place.
So what's happening now? Will Commerzbank be an Italian company soon?
That's unlikely. First of all, with a 9% stake, UniCredit is far from being that influential yet. The German government still has 12% of the bank and is thus the largest individual shareholder. And Berlin has already said they would stop further selling their stake in Commerzbank. But there's some good news too, some relief out of Italy. UniCredit says that while indeed they would like to buy up Commerzbank, they would not want to do it against the will of the bank and not against the will of the German government either. That makes a lot of sense. On the one side, of course, UniCredit was looking for a larger footprint in Europe, but on the other hand, having the government against you from the get-go, and as a bank that would be even larger than the previous too big to fail bank, would be complicated and is certainly a turn-off for management as well.
Lars, thank you. Lars Halter reporting there from Berlin. Now the news, China's central bank on Wednesday slashed another key interest rate a day after it unveiled a raft of new measures aimed at boosting its ailing economy. The medium-term lending facility, the interest for one-year loans to financial institutions, was cut from 2.3% to 2%. The rate was last lowered in July. On Tuesday, Beijing announced a slate of support measures, including rate cuts, mortgage requirement easing and fresh funding for equity purchases. And now to news from the world of sport with my colleague Deepika. Deepika, take it away.
Thanks and good afternoon. First, let's talk about cricket because there's a good news for all Rishabh Pant fans. Now, latest ICC Test rankings bring some great news for Indian cricketer Rishabh Pant as he re-enters top 10 Test rankings. Top 10 rankings list across Test and ODI saw a shake-up as a number of the world's best players thrived in the last week of international action. And making his Test return, Rishabh Pant re-entered the Test batting rankings at 6th. Off the back of a century in the second innings of India's victory over Bangladesh, winning streak in ODIs has ended. Now England made it 1-2 and kept its hopes alive of winning the 5-match series after rain halted the play with its score at 254 for 4. In soccer, Real Madrid edged past Alaves by 3-2 at home in La Liga, courtesy of goals from Lucas, Kylian Mbappe and Rodrigo. Real opened the scoring a little over a minute after kickoff when Vazquez scored a goal from a close range. Real kept dominating throughout the first half and extended its lead in the 40th minute when Mbappe made a tidy finish to the right of the goalkeeper. Real looked to be heading for an easy victory when Rodrigo scored the third goal 3 minutes after the break. Carlos Benavides and Kike Garcia scored in the 88th and 89th minutes for Alaves, but Madrid held on to win the match narrowly. In badminton, double Olympics medalist PV Sindhu will have South Korean great Liu Yu as her consulting coach on interim basis as she bolstered her coaching team ahead of her anticipated return to action next month. The move comes after the recent appointment of Anup Sridhar as Sindhu's interim coach. The duo will be in Sindhu's coaching team until December this year. A decision on a permanent coaching team is expected by that time. Yu is a former world #1 and Sindhu's teammate during Premier Badminton League. He brings vast international experience and a reputation for meticulous preparation. He's also a 2006 World Championship bronze medalist in singles and has 2 Asian Games team gold medals in 2002 and 2014. PV Sindhu is expected to return to competitive action at the Finland Open and Denmark Open, both scheduled to take place in the month of October. Now, the Indian duo of Jeevan and Vijay Sundar Prashant won the Hangzhou Open 2024 title, beating Germany in men's doubles final in China on Tuesday. The pair defeated the German pair of Konstantin Franzen and Henrik Jebens by 4-6, 7-6 and 10-7 in the finals. It conceded the first set to the Germans before fighting its way back into the match to go all the way. Jeevan and Vijay pulled off a comeback in the semi-finals against Uruguay's Ariel Beja and Robert Galloway of the USA. So those were the top highlights of the hour. Back to you, sir.
Thank you, Deepika. Appreciate it. And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of DD India News Hour. You can get all the latest news and updates on the DD India mobile app. It's available on Android and iOS platforms. You can scan the QR code on the screen now to download it. Let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. You can connect with us on Facebook, X and Instagram. You can also check out our website ddindia.co.in. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran. All of us here in New Delhi. Thanks for watching DD India News Hour.